Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with the midweek update in the world of cannabis. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it, as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. There's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. We're going to start with this news with the Canna recapping Labor Day weekend sales as cannabis consumer spending tightens, highlighting the importance of brand strength. And so obviously brand does play a very important factor in the long run, but the main thing to consider is that this industry continuing to operate with both hands tied behind their backs, not seeing growth year over year, but we can attribute that to the fact that some of the biggest markets we were expecting to come online a long time ago, along with Arizona in January 2021, like they could have, and that's New York, New Jersey. They've been delayed thus far, and the continual delay just makes it harder for this industry, although I think they will continue chugging along because, there's obviously a legal demand for cannabis and they're supplying it. And so on top of that, though, just wanted to add Illinois, another state where just due to lawsuits, they have not been able to open an extra 185 dispensaries. And so a lot of factors that just due to bureaucracy and red tape have not allowed this industry to thrive. And so just highlighting that's where we are, but doesn't mean that they're going down without a fight. They're still seeing steady sales along the way. Consumer spending on cannabis roughly flat year over year over Labor Day weekend, a historic top 5 cannabis spending holiday. And so Curna, one of the most comprehensive tech infrastructures, notes that consumer spending, cannabis spending over Labor Day weekend was roughly flat over the same time period last year, with this year showing a total of still strong $229.8 million in sales. And so compared to last year's Labor Day weekend spend, this year's holiday weekend showed a 2% decrease in consumer spend, with both fewer shoppers making purchases and shoppers purchasing smaller basket sizes. And so unfortunately, over from last year this time period, we haven't seen a whole lot new markets come online. New Jersey's been the only one, and again with a limited number of dispensaries. And so just think the potential, if lawmakers and regulators wanted the industry to thrive, how much better and how much more growth they could be seeing. Obviously, due to whether it's incompetence or, maybe things are harder than they make it out to be to actually get things going. Regardless, that just helps contribute to the lack of growth that they could be seeing had things been done better. And so as the macroeconomic climate continues to shift and consumers tighten their spending habits in other discretionary industries, it's clear that although cannabis is recession resilient, it's certainly not immune. And so just a bit more information of the breakdown of the sales trends, but just wanted to share that to highlight the sales are still steady and they're strong. While they might not be growing, in every aspect that we want to see it, still highlights that the legal market, there's demand for it and it's not going anywhere. And so with that, bring you over to Forbes as they highlight global cannabis sales to skyrocket to $57 billion in 2026, says top market research firm. And that firm, again, is BDSA, one that I reference a lot. So take this with a grain of salt as well, but good to see this in a major headline like Forbes again, bringing the attention to this global industry that will become massive. Global cannabis sales will grow to $57 billion in 2026, according to the latest projections from BDSA, a top Colorado-based cannabis market research firm. Furthermore, the U.S. cannabis sales will skyrocket to $42 billion in 2026, which will make up 75% of total cannabis sales. And despite concerns caused by inflation, legal cannabis sales in the U.S. will surge to $27 billion by the end of this year, a 7% jump over last year's sales of $25. And again, slow just because of delays in some prime markets. More importantly, the macroeconomic trends that no one can plan for. And so despite everything that's been going on in this crazy world at this point in time, a 7% jump year over year is still something to be proud about for this industry that it continues to operate with both hands tied behind their backs. And so not going to go through the whole article, but you can grab the link below if you wanted to read through it a little bit more. So with that, on to some news. Todd Harrison shares Rhode Island legalizes cannabis for recreational use. And so happy to share that Rhode Island is moving the ball forward and launching their adult use program. Retail sales expect to begin as early as December 1st, 2022. And so not going to go through this whole thing as it's still early and is yet to launch, but you can grab the link below if you wanted to read through this blog.com article, it seems. And then so with that, we've got Tom Engel sharing that New Jersey regulators issued guidance clarifying that most employers cannot fire workers based solely on positive drug tests for cannabis. And so this is more great news, as of course, the more we can protect those in the industry, the better we can reduce the stigma and help normalize this plant, as we should have a long time ago. And so not much more to add in this, but apparently there are exceptions, because of course it says most here, as now businesses in New Jersey are still able to maintain drug-free workplace policies and take action against workers who are reasonably suspected of being impaired on the job, but with limited expectations for positions that involve federal contracts. And so, of course, that federal overhang always seems to manage to get into the way. So a little bit more, if you wanted to read what they managed to get through from the latest CRC, Cannabis Regulatory Commission out of New Jersey, some workplace impairment guidance, and some changes that they plan to make. And so with that, though, just wanted to share that while New Jersey CRC had their meeting, for some unfortunate reason, cannabis companies' expansion plans for shop along Route 130 must wait, as Curaleaf was not on the Cannabis Regulatory Commission meeting agenda held on Friday to discuss selling recreational pot in Bordentown. And so this would have been last week on Friday, and so very unfortunate. Now, the very annoying thing about this article from patch.com is that it just states this fact, but there's no why in the article. Curaleaf's application to sell was not approved, held on Friday, according to the meeting's agenda, which is fine, but you're not going to provide any context as to why? Fair enough, which is very fucking annoying, as Curaleaf has previously received the Commission's approval to sell cannabis in Bordentown, and the company's previously received the approval to sell rec at these other locations. And so the next meeting of the Commission is October 20th, but again, no reason from the CRC. So again, is it really that hard to approve new locations to legally supply the extreme demand that you're seeing? Or is it, mere just incompetence? And I think it's a lot more incompetence. But regardless, thank you, Todd Harrison, for sharing a little bit more on New Jersey while we're at it, as a study of New Jersey municipalities found, much like in other markets, a positive association between the decision to allow cannabis-related businesses and home prices. Meaning, if you legalize cannabis, the value of homes actually goes up, not down. And so we saw this in California. We're seeing this in a lot of other states. Colorado, I think, was one. Either way, it's been reported from many states that have legalized already, and so good that New Jersey's seeing this. So yeah, it actually helps the economy. It's better in all these different ways, jobs, tax revenue, and all that. So I'm not going to go through this, but you can grab the link below if you wanted to read that. Just wanted to add, because I thought this was interesting, more government agencies are being forced to acknowledge the very real data that highlights the benefits of ending cannabis prohibition, as the Treasury asks White House to approve plan on collecting cannabis business banking data. So it almost seems like they're preparing for a pivot, as one cannabis association said it is pleased to see the department recognize the impact that cannabis-related businesses are having on our financial system. Not just for tax revenue, not just for jobs, not just how much easier it would be for banks, cannabis businesses, payment processors, and all that if SAFE passed, allowing cash to get off the streets, but then at the same time also increasing home valuations because you have a safer, non-addictive alternative to opioids. Therefore, your state is seeing a 25% decrease in opioid overdoses. This is a good thing, and it increases the quality of life, the value of life, therefore increasing the value, or driving the value and the cost up. So not going to go through this one as well, but you can grab more, as it's quite interesting just to see, again, more agencies have to acknowledge what is real. And while this is behind a paywall, I can't get to it. Just wanted to share this because it's from the BostonGlobe.com. So obviously based out of Massachusetts, a state with a legal cannabis, medical, and adult use. But it's an opinion piece smoothing the way for more cannabis shops. So I'm just going to read the title. Well, I already just read the title, but just the main highlight down here. Mayor Michelle Wu is on the right track. Get the zoning board out of Boston's cannabis licensing process. And what does this sound like? Get regulators out of the industry and open up more dispensaries because of the benefits of having more dispensaries, much like we just saw in here, right? And much like we're just seeing across the board. And so again, as more people can acknowledge and realize the benefits, as opposed to being, fed the fear and propaganda and being hesitant to take any action, getting anything done, ultimately, the more voices we can have talking common sense about this and spreading the awareness, the better. So just wanted to share that one as we move on to more state news. Tom Angle, thank you for sharing this one. As of yesterday, the Missouri Supreme Court rejected cannabis opponents' last-ditch effort to remove a legalization measure from the November ballot. Take that, Prohibitionists. And I just wanted to share this comment because it's so well said, just to highlight how awful and disgusting it was of the Prohibitionists, not just to continue going at something that's just false in reality, but to go against the function of democracy. It can't be stressed enough how odious this effort was, literally trying to toss valid signatures from Missouri voters. If prohibitionists want to argue during a campaign that MJ causes cannibalism and impotence, fine. But trying to undermine valid electoral process is horrifying. And so very well said, a lot better than my little ramble on before that, but just well summarizes the fact that thank God at least the Missouri Supreme Court stood up for the people of Missouri by tossing the prohibitionists' last unjustified, pathetic attempt. And so with that, we will see Missouri voters vote on the ballot in November, which is great, as Missouri is a state with a large population that has seen a successful medical program growing very quickly over the last few years. On top of that, just to reiterate and remind you that not only will have Missouri, but Maryland as well. So Puff Daddy, thanks for sharing this one. Question for Maryland voters to decide on rec cannabis legalization. And so another state, a larger population, and a successful medical program that needs the boost for adult use because it's been going for a while. And of course, it's it's hard to recruit patients when doctors aren't educated about, cannabis's medical uses, and therefore you want that adult use program to launch to help boost those sales. And so that will be coming in Maryland. Happy to share that. While we have North Dakota, they will be voting on the ballot as well, but this is another prime example of one individual idiot getting in the way of democracy functioning in North Dakota. And so this one individual idiot is the tax commissioner. He shouldn't have a job after we go through this story, but it gets funny as we go through. So let's follow along. Pot legalization group says North Dakota is intentionally misleading voters on measures financial impact. So yeah, again, it's not North Dakota, but it's the tax commissioner of North Dakota who should lose his job 100%. State officials who calculated a fiscal note for the pot legalization measure did not attempt to quantify how much tax revenue North Dakota would bring in through the sale of cannabis, because obviously that's something you can apply to every transaction, and they would bring in a lot. And so there are obviously good ways to go about this. So when North Dakota voters read through their ballots this fall, they will find a one-sentence fiscal summary at the bottom of a ballot measure that would legalize the recreational use and sale of cannabis. And so the note estimates legalizing the drug for adults and administering a pot program would come at a net negative cost to the state of more than $1.8 million over the next 5 years, saying the state would lose money selling cannabis. The only person to ever lose money selling cannabis, I thought, was like the Ontario government in Canada, just because governments can't do anything well that the private sector can do. But again, like, we're seeing another prime example of just stupidity, not actual practice. The estimated fiscal impact of this measure beginning in 2023 through the 2025-2027 biennium is revenue of $3.1 million. What is this guy smoking? Or what is he drinking? Because he's much more likely an alcoholic than consuming cannabis. And expenses of $4.9 million, the fiscal note reads. Okay, you're going to make a whole lot more money than $3.1 million. Not included in the financial projection is a key piece of context. The state officials who calculated the potential gains and losses did not attempt to quantify how much tax revenue North Dakota would bring in through the sale of cannabis. And so Tax Commissioner Brian Crochus, this is the guy right here who should be held responsible just simply by losing his job. There you go. You can't do your job right. You cannot come up with accurate calculations. Therefore, we need someone who can. It says unknown variables like the cost of cannabis products and the level of sales at dispensaries, like information you could, that's your job. You got to do work to find out these numbers. You can run these calculations. Prevents his office from estimating how much tax revenue legal pot would generate. So effectively, he's saying it's a bit of work to find out. Therefore, I can't do it. Ridiculous. And so again, one individual making things seem a lot worse than it could be. He should be removed from his job and held accountable for that. And so, of course, Dave Owen, chairman of the New Approach North Dakota, said the abbreviated fiscal note tacked onto his group's measure is obviously incomplete and intentionally misleading for voters, which is, again, a big stain on that tax commissioner who's either just really stupid, not qualified for his job, or he's purposely being deceitful and misleading the voters of North Dakota. Either way, this man should be held accountable, and that, unfortunate question should be corrected so that the people of North Dakota actually understand what they're voting for in November. That is how a functioning democracy would work. And so with that, wanted to share this news from Florida politics. Trulieve pumps $5 million more into cannabis legalization push. And so good to see Trulieve, which has twice as many storefronts as any competitor and which has historically dominated sales in the state's cannabis sector, playing the game as all the other industries do, put another big chunk of money into smart and safe Florida initiatives to eventually legalize non-medical or recreational cannabis use for adults. And so if this initiative is successful and gets on the ballot, it would create a potential for a citizen initiative-driven constitutional amendment that would elevate legalized cannabis to the state constitution, assuming 60% of Floridians voted yes. And so Trulieve's $5 million donation on September 2nd is the second one in less than a month, as the multi-state operator puts $5 million into the campaign, or it originally already put $5 million on August 9th. And so it's putting its second $5 million, $10 million thus far. Trulieve is the only contributor to the effort, with none of the state's other medical cannabis treatment companies pointing up. And so it is fair to see that Trulieve is putting more money in right now where their mouth is, because obviously the number of dispensaries, the longer it takes for Florida to legalize for adult use, the longer it takes for them to see the benefit of the scale that they have in that state, because obviously medical can only grow so quickly. And so good to see them putting the money in. I imagine that we're going to see other MSOs probably help along with this initiative over time, but it's still early. And so again, good to see Trulieve putting this in, because you got to pay to play, it seems, in most industries in America. So you can pause to read for a bit more info, or you can grab the link if you wanted to read through the whole thing. But another interesting one out of Florida from RespectMyRegion.com, sharing as Cookies Miami sells more flower in first week open than all other Florida dispensaries. And so, of course, you need to take the number of ounces and then divide it by the number of dispensaries to see the average number of ounces each one is selling. But wanted to highlight again the importance of brand over time, as West Coast legacy brands continue to prove the power of culture and reputation in a market saturated with multi-state operators. Cookies Cannabis, arguably the most famous weed brand in the world, opened its first storefront in Miami on August 13th. The TRP owned and operated location situated conveniently near downtown and the airport on Bird Road saw a record-breaking first week. And so in its first week open in Florida, Cookies Miami sold 580.2 ounces of flower and 441,627 milligrams of oil. And so the source is at the bottom right down here. But thing is, they have one dispensary selling that much. And so obviously we can see if Sanctuary Cannabis sold, less than double, but more than what Cookies did at 580, if they did 869. But they've got 11 dispensaries. You divide that by 11, they're selling a lot less out of each individual dispensary, right? And so no other Florida dispensary has come close to the number that Cookies Miami hit in its first week. So that is very impressive. And whoever wrote this, good finding this. As in comparison to Trulieve, or good job finding this. As in comparison to Trulieve, the largest operator in the state with 120 locations, Cookies sold nearly double the amount of flower in its first week as each individual Trulieve location did in the same time frame. Each location averaged 317 ounces of flower sold during August 12th and 18th, 2022. So again, highlighting why Trulieve wants that initiative to come sooner than later so that they can see the benefits of rec legalization. Further, Mauve with 56 locations sold around 121.5 ounces of flower per location in the same week, while Curaleaf with 51 locations sold around 248 ounces of flower per location. So great to see this breakdown. There's a lot more information in here. If you wanted to read through it, you can pause. Otherwise, you can grab the link, but got to move along as there's a lot of stories. So with that, thank you, Puff Daddy, for sharing. Sweet Home, Alabama. Apparently, companies begin requesting applications for medical cannabis licenses. And so around 2 companies total requests have been submitted in the first week of applications. And so it seems like this is an ongoing process. So just happy to share this update, but we'll hopefully be able to update you more as Alabama gets this medical program going for those that need a safer, non-addictive alternative in that state. And so with that, wanted to share some snippets from investment firms. So thanks, Todd, for sharing this one. Beacon on U.S. Cannabis. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but going to leave it here so you can pause to read if you're interested. Cannabis industry plays of the week. Polling indicates strong voter support for SAFE. Coverage initiated of Schwazy. I think that's what SHWZ, the ticker, represents. And so more information here if you wanted to pause to read. And we're going to move on to Pablo at Cantor on U.S. Cannabis. And so a bit more of a bearish take. Always take what Pablo has to say with a grain of salt, but thanks, Todd, for sharing this one for us. And so investment summary, while stock sentiment remains mostly dependent on the reform news flow, and we are just anxiously, patiently awaiting that, the hard data do not look encouraging so far in third quarter 2022, and that is according to Pablo. So you can grab the link below if you wanted to get more information out of that, as you might not be able to see what's on the side down there. And then we've got this last one, Shooter McGinley on U.S. Cannabis. So thanks, Todd, for sharing this one. This one's from Needham. So conference takeaways: growth is greener in the Garden State. Cash remains king. And so you can pause to read for more information on Needham, but that's all we got for investment firms snippets. And so wanted to share this one from NewJersey.com just to provide, again, an update from a talking point from someone in the know in the industry, highlighting sort of where we sit and what we can expect from now until the end of the year. And so again, take this with a grain of salt, but just wanted to share this because I found it. Congress could again try to allow weed businesses to get banking services in return to DC. And yeah, they should be doing this. This is technically their job. And to see more headlines saying Congress could again try to allow instead of doing their fucking job is infuriating. And so as we move through this though, the provisions of the Secure and Fair Enforcement or Safe Banking Act, which passed the House on several occasions, were added to legislation setting defense policy for the 12 months beginning October 1. And when the House in July approved a package of 6 spending bills to fund the federal government beginning next month, lawmakers included a provision in the Financial Services and General Government Appropriations measure to prevent the government from spending any money to penalize banks providing services to legal cannabis businesses. But as they say this, I don't believe this can still be a factor because they might be referring to the USCC bill, which had provisions added that would have included SAFE, but it didn't make it through the conference process because Schumer, again, breaking his promises to the industry, pulled it out at the last minute. And so are they referring to that, or are they referring to some other effort like potentially getting SAFE in the NDA? I'm not exactly sure, but just wanted to share that. So as we move along, if I was unclear there and you think you have a better understanding, let me know of what they're referring to here in the comments. But we have a critical window for opportunity between now and the end of the year to enact some common sense reforms, starting with access to the banking system, said Rep. Ed Perlmutter of Colorado, the chief sponsor of Safe Banking. Continued inaction on this issue is dangerous and neglectful. Very true. Continues to put communities, businesses, employees, and patients at risk across the country, which is all very true. And the longer the Dems delay passing this common sense legislation, the worse this problem gets as it grows and exacerbates over time as all of these dispensaries, as more dispensaries open up, I should say, carrying cash because they cannot work with the banking system. And so at this point in time, after watching the last year and a half, you cannot convince me that the Dems and the Biden administration at this current time do not hate American values and are doing everything that they can to work against the American people, as opposed to, trying to help them flourish. It's disgusting. But main thing I just wanted to get to out of this thing here, the House and Senate have very few legislative days left before they break for the elections, said Khadija Tribble, the new chief executive of the U.S. Cannabis Council. The most likely scenario at this point is that Congress will pass a continuing resolution in September and then consider an omnibus package in lame duck. So take this with a grain of salt, but this is another rough timeline from someone in the know, the new CEO of the U.S. Cannabis Council. So just wanted to share this. I don't know how relevant or accurate it is, of course. Plan accordingly for your own situation, but we don't know what's going to happen in November. Personally, I still think it's going to be a red wave in both the House and the Senate, and that could pressure the Dems to actually pass some form of Safe Plus from November until January, which would be the lame duck session. I think that's the best outcome, but again, we don't know. So plan accordingly for your own situations. This is not advice, but just trying to share the most up-to-date information about the industry as we can. And so last few stories, this one from Fox 9 is cannabis laws by state in 2022. And so if you're new to the channel, you're unfamiliar, just a good read through to educate yourself on which states have legalized for adult use, which ones have legalized for medical, which ones have legalized for medical only, not yet reformed for adult use, and just basically a rundown of what has happened, especially since the first few states legalized, I think California for medical in the 90s, and then Colorado for adult use in 2012, I believe it was. And so, but again, yeah, it goes through states, territories where both recreational and medical cannabis is legal. Much longer list now than before. States, territories where only medical is legal, getting much longer. And again, this is proof right here that cannabis does not belong as a Schedule 1 substance in the CSA and should be removed and descheduled immediately, which would again solve so many American issues domestically just by doing that. But regardless, more information on this if you wanted to grab the link below and go through the whole thing. And so despite all of that, despite cannabis having obvious medical value, unfortunately, it is set to stay on the World Anti-Doping Agency prohibited list, despite all of the backlash that the WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, received last year after banning Sha'Carri Richardson, but then allowing a Russian skater to compete after having tested positive for drugs, which is insane. That is the clearest discrimination you can see this day and age. But WADA expected to keep cannabis on ban list after official review that followed U.S. sprinter Sha'Carri Richardson's 2021 suspension. So I can't even remember the last time I watched the Olympics. I certainly will do my best never to tune in again, especially as WADA doubles down on denying reality. You know what would be even cooler? If we got rid of the World Anti-Doping Agency and just let all the top athletes dope as much as they wanted. How much more entertaining would sports get? Now, would that be too much? Let me know in the comments what you think. But I think we're onto something there. And so last few stories, Benzinga Cannabis Conference award winners announced at the Chicago conference this past week. And so I'm not going to go through it. You can check out the full list below, and it is a fun read through because you'll see many familiar names. And of course, it is nice to see many in the industry finally get recognized for the hard work that they've put in, despite the stigma and the lack of respect this industry gets, especially from the US government, which is insane. It's like third world dictators get more respect than, American entrepreneurs from the US government, yet these entrepreneurs are doing more to fight the opioid epidemic than Big Pharma and the government combined. And so ridiculous, but nonetheless, just happy to shed a little bit of positive life on those in this industry working very hard for us. And while I did not win Cannabis Report of the Year, unfortunately, I refuse to accept any rewards until we're holding 5 baggers on our way to being 10 baggers. And so with that, MJ Biz Daily reports that German cannabis imports growing as cannabis's leading share wanes. And so just wanted to highlight this as a bit of an update out of Germany. Germany's cannabis imports, medical and scientific cannabis imports in Germany have been increasing every year since 2017, when the country only brought in 1,780 kilograms. So still only bringing in such a small amount, serving such a small medical sample size, but not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. Obviously, you can grab the link if you wanted to read through more, but just to highlight Germany's medical cannabis imports as of 2021. And so most is coming from Canada, then from Denmark, but from my understanding, Aurora Cannabis, which is a Canadian LP, has a facility in Denmark, and they're EU GMP certified and able to export. So I believe a lot of the cannabis coming from Aurora is actually coming from Denmark and not Canada. And so some of the numbers from a Canadian LP would be under the Denmark, from my understanding, but I could be wrong. And that's what I got out of this article, though. Netherlands as well, behind Denmark, then Portugal, Australia, Uruguay, and then we're seeing tiny numbers from a lot of these other countries. And so apparently Canada's being challenged. I mean, not so much, but of course, you can only be challenged so much while these countries take a very long time to reform their outdated medical laws. But just wanted to share another highlight, as Aurora also holds one of the 3 licenses for medical cannabis production in Germany, along with another company, I think it's Demacan, I forget, but Tilray is the third company that they don't mention here, and its EU GMP certified facility facility there called Aurora Leona opened in July, meaning a limited amount of German demand will be met by Aurora's facility there. And what they don't highlight in this whole article is that that would be the same for the third company. That would be the same for the third company, I think it's Demacan again, but for Tilray as well. So I don't know when Tilray's EU GMP certified facility was finally opened, probably along the same timeline as this. We can be expected if they got approved at the same time and are working towards the same objective. But so this just means that more cannabis will be coming from inside of Germany, from Aurora Cannabis, Tilray brands, and then the third, again, I think it was a private company though, so they're not publicly traded. So just wanted to point that out because there are three producers that are legally allowed to grow in Germany, and it seems like they're finally just getting approved, and that's why the number of domestic German cultivation is so small and pretty much non-existent still. So just wanted to share this. You can grab the link below if you want to read more about the German market, but just to highlight, not to do what Canada does, and we know the US won't make the same mistakes as Canada did, but just to highlight, thank you Matt Lemers again, a writer for MJ Biz Daily, or journalist for them. The most profitable cannabis businesses in Canada are owned by the government, as they serve as the annoying and hated middleman, creating a monopoly on the distribution of all cannabis products throughout the states. And so for the provincial monopoly cannabis wholesaler profit loss most recent full year, Ontario made $70.2 million after I think losing money in their first few years, which is again pathetic. Quebec $66.5 million, could be making so much more if they'd opened more than 50 dispensaries for their 8 million people. BC $22.4 million, New Brunswick $10.8 million, but apparently, correction, New Brunswick should be $16.5 million profit, not $10.8, even better. Well, lastly, Alberta, $7 million forecast. While Alberta was one of the most lenient provinces, much like Ontario, but Alberta did it first, no doubt, with the private model allowing citizens to apply for licenses and opening dispensaries where they can sell their product out of. But again, they have to buy it, I think, from the provincial monopoly. And so just to highlight, when you do it the wrong way, compared to private sector losses, selected Canadian cannabis producers, Canopy $5.9 billion, Aurora $5.4 billion, Hexa $1.6 billion, Old Tilray $1.3 billion, Sundial $900 million, and New Tilray $434 million, equaling total losses of $15.5 billion. He's got all the sources even down here in one spot, so thanks Matt for putting this together. But it just highlights that when the government does a terrible job of allowing the industry to roll out and gives as many cultivating licenses as possible to companies, especially companies that have fundings in the billions, to create brand new facilities and grow hundreds of thousands of kilograms of pot, way more pot than even 40 million Canadians could smoke if all 40 million Canadians were adults and consumed cannabis. It was just insane from the get-go. And so it's almost like by design they're trying to make it look like, oh, look at how much better the public sector can run parts of industry, much better than the private. But no, it was just what not to do. Look at Canada, and we know that the US has learned a lot from this, and they're not going to make the same mistakes. So just wanted to share this as well because it's very interesting to read through. Last one, just to highlight where I think we've come to, not necessarily where I thought we'd be at this point, but just everything that I've seen, especially from the Biden administration and the Dems over the last year and a half, makes me think that the best possible thing would be a red wave in November, which kicks the Dems out come January, and so it forces them to act in that lame duck session in November. Again, we don't know what's going to happen, so plan accordingly for your own situation if you think this industry is going to be much bigger in the future than it is now. But just to highlight this wisdom from MJ Stock Trader, to summarize, Republicans could care less if safe banking passes and Democrats are bought by Big Pharma. But I would argue that Republicans are also bought by Big Pharma as well, but many Republicans are also bought by banks, insurance companies, and many of the forces that are behind lobbying for passing the Safe Banking Act as well. And so, insisting on social equity justice provisions is just a way for Democrats to accomplish nothing while saying, we tried, thus keeping their very uninformed voter base and Big Pharma happy, which I would say is very true, and that seems to be their game plan thus far, and that's why they haven't done anything. They continue to delay. And so, goes a little bit further. Dems only allow legal cannabis because they can tax and regulate the hell out of it at the state level while keeping it a Schedule I drug at the federal level, so they can still collect 280E taxes. Well said, MJ Stock Trader. I think that's on point. I guess that's pro-cannabis. And I mean, that's what's allowed the industry to thrive thus far. And I mean, fortunately, I still think it's the state-led growth story plus the organic reform that we're going to see over time that will eventually open the floodgates for this industry, bottom line. And so lastly, Dems aren't negotiating safe banking from a position of strength. The GOP could care less if it passes. It's not in their top 100 of priorities. Saying we want social justice added or else no safe banking is meaningless to the GOP, and Sen Schumer knows this. And I do agree, the more that the Dems say that they want to push for social equity, I think the worse chances that they have of actually getting everything that they want. And so the best thing that they could do is come together and try and pass something at this point in time. And so obviously, we've been through the ringer. I'm not giving up yet, but just wanted to relay this last bit. And so that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in and really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Sunday for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great week, everybody.